They told me to use the service entrance, not with words, with a look. The kind of look that takes exactly 1 second to deliver and a lifetime to forget. My sister-in-law's mother, a woman named Patricia, who wore her pearls like a crown and her opinions like a weapon, glanced at my outfit when I walked through the front door of the Harlow Grand, tilted her chin exactly half an inch upward, and said to the woman beside her, loud enough for me to hear, "I don't understand why Marcus insists on inviting the whole family. Some branches of the tree just don't belong at the table." She didn't look at me when she said it. That was the part that stayed with me. I wasn't even worth a direct insult. I smoothed the front of my blazer, navy blue, clean lines, nothing flashy. I had dressed deliberately understated, the way I always did at family events, because I had learned a long time ago that the less I gave people to comment on, the less ammunition they had. It hadn't worked. It never worked with Patricia. She could find a thread to pull in a blank wall. My brother Marcus was across the room, laughing with his fiancée's father near the bar. He saw me come in. He raised his glass in a small, distracted half wave, the kind you give to someone you're obligated to acknowledge but not quite motivated to approach. Then he turned back to his conversation. I took a glass of sparkling water from a passing tray and found a spot near the window, slightly apart from the clusters of guests who all seemed to know each other, all seemed to belong to the same world. A world of lake houses and country club memberships and the easy confidence that comes from never once having to wonder if the lights would stay on this month. I knew that world. I had built my way into the edges of it, but nobody in this room knew that because Marcus had never told them, and I had never corrected the silence. His fiancée, Courtney, drifted over about 20 minutes into the cocktail hour. She was beautiful in the particular way that very confident women are beautiful. Not just the features, but the posture, the assumption that every room was hers to arrange. She looked at me with a smile that was technically a smile in the way that a contract termination letter is technically just paperwork. "You made it," she said. "I did," I said. She let a beat pass, glancing once, deliberately, at my blazer, my shoes, my lack of jewelry. "Marcus said you work in real estate or something?" "Something like that," I said. "How sweet." She touched my arm once, lightly. The way you touch a piece of furniture you're deciding whether to keep. "Well, enjoy the party. The caterers made these little crab things that are just divine." She drifted away before I could respond, already reaching for someone else's attention, already forgetting I existed. I stayed by the window. I watched the room. I did what I've always done in rooms like this. I counted. Not people. Not glasses of champagne. I counted the details that everyone else was too busy performing to notice. The crown molding that needed recalking along the east wall. The slight warp in the hardwood near the fireplace where moisture had gotten underneath. The chandelier in the main hall that hung a 1/4 inch off-center, which meant the anchor bolt was probably loose, and the last inspection had missed it. I noticed these things because I own this building. Not own in the sense of having bought a share of it or invested in a fund that held a stake in it. I mean, my name is on the deed. My signature is on every lease. When the Harlow Grand's previous owners couldn't make their debt payments 3 years ago, I was the one who bought the note, restructured the financing, and took the title when they defaulted. I spent 14 months and more money than I will ever say out loud, turning a property that smelled like mildew and broken promises into one of the most sought-after event venues in the state. Courtney had booked it for her engagement party without knowing. Nobody in this room knew. Marcus didn't know. He thought I was, in his words from a phone call 6 months ago, doing okay for yourself, I guess, with the property stuff. He thought I managed rentals. He thought I was a step above a landlord. I had not corrected him. There were reasons for that, and they stretched back years through a history I was still deciding how to feel about standing next to a window in a room I technically owned while my brother's future mother-in-law told someone I didn't belong here. But I was deciding fast. Let me tell you what I actually do, because it matters to everything that happened next. I buy distressed commercial real estate, hotels that are bleeding money, event venues in foreclosure, mixed-use buildings that banks are desperate to offload before the losses get worse. I buy them at fractions of their value, bring in my own team, and rebuild them into something that turns a profit. I have been doing this since I was 26 years old, which means I have been doing it for 7 years. And I have made every single decision alone, with no help from my family, because my family did not offer help. They offered something else entirely. When I was 23, my father sat me down at the kitchen table and told me he needed money. Not asked. Told. The way you tell someone there's been a change of plans. He had co-signed a loan for Marcus's first business venture, a fitness studio that lasted 11 months, and the payments had run dry. The bank was calling. I had just finished my second year working at a commercial real estate firm, making decent but not remarkable money, and I had saved carefully. $11,000. My entire financial cushion, the thing standing between me and starting over from zero. My father looked at me across that table and said, "You're the responsible one. You always figure it out." I gave him $9,000. I kept $2 because I was afraid to have nothing. Marcus's studio failed anyway. My father never mentioned the money again. Marcus never knew I had given it. 2 years later, I found the first property I wanted to buy, a closed-down bed and breakfast in a small coastal town that I had been watching for 8 months, tracking the owner's debt situation, waiting for the right moment. I needed a bridge loan to cover the gap between what I had saved and what the purchase required. I went to my father first, not for a gift, just to ask if he knew anyone, any connection, any introduction to a private lender. He told me he didn't have those kinds of contacts. He suggested I try a bank. He asked if I had considered a safer career path. I got the bridge loan through a colleague. I bought the bed and breakfast. I turned it around in 16 months and sold it for a number that made the colleague who had introduced me to the lender send me a bottle of champagne. I used that money to buy the next property and the next. I never told my family the numbers because I had learned by then that telling them numbers created a specific problem. The problem was that numbers made me into a resource instead of a person. I had already felt what it was like to be their resource. I did not want to repeat the experience with larger figures, so I kept quiet. I drove an unremarkable car, I wore unremarkable clothes, I showed up to family events and answered questions about the property stuff in ways that were technically accurate, and gave nothing away. I was careful. I was patient. Standing by that window, I realized I had been careful and patient for so long that the people in this room had mistaken my restraint for smallness. Patricia drifted past me again on her way to the hors d'oeuvres table. She didn't acknowledge me, but she said to her companion, a woman with a blonde chignon and a different set of pearls, "Courtney is so gracious, really, inviting everyone, even the ones who are a bit out of their depth." The woman with the chignon glanced in my direction and gave a small, sympathetic smile, the kind you give to a child who has shown up to a formal dinner in a Halloween costume. I looked at my watch. It was 7:14. I thought about the $9,000. I thought about the 2 sweaters I had worn at the same time in my apartment one January because I was rationing my heating bill. Not because I was poor, because I was being careful, because I was building something. While my father was using the money I had given him to make a car payment on the lease Marcus needed to look successful at client meetings, I thought about the call I had gotten 11 months ago from my mother, bright and chatty, telling me that Marcus and Courtney had booked the most gorgeous venue. You have to see the pictures. It's called the Harlow Grand. I had gone very still on the phone. I had said, "That sounds lovely." I had not said anything else. I had thought at the time that I would simply attend and say nothing. Let them have their party, let the evening pass, go home, keep building in silence. But Patricia's voice carried, and the woman with the chignon's sympathetic smile landed somewhere it wasn't supposed to land, and something that had been very still in me for a very long time stopped being still. I took out my phone, not to check messages. I opened the property management application I use for all my venues. I pulled up the Harlow Grand's active events for the evening. I found the booking, I read the contract number. I scrolled to the client communication section and found the name of the event coordinator who had handled the booking. A member of my staff named Diana, who had been with me for 4 years, and who knew, as all of my senior staff knew, exactly who I was. I typed Diana a message. 4 words: code review, main hall, now. I watched her across the room. She was near the catering station, clipboard in hand, doing what event coordinators do at the 90-minute mark of a cocktail hour. She looked at her phone. She looked up. She found me by the window. Her eyes went wide in a way she immediately controlled because Diana is exceptional at her job. She gave me a single, composed nod. I put my phone in my pocket. I had written the venue's guest conduct policy myself, modeled after a situation at a different property where a client's family member had verbally abused 2 members of my waitstaff during a rehearsal dinner. The policy was clear, and it was part of every signed contract. Harassment, humiliation, or discriminatory conduct directed at staff or ownership at any Harlow property constituted grounds for immediate event termination without refund. We called it the Conduct Clause. We had invoked it twice before, both times involving vendors who had not been the guests, and both times quietly, with lawyers present. I had never invoked it from inside the event itself. I had never had a reason to. Courtney materialized at my elbow, which surprised me because I had not seen her approach. She must have noticed Diana's reaction and tracked it back to me because she was observant in the way that people who have grown up managing social situations are observant. She looked at my phone, then at my face. "Is everything all right?" she asked. Her tone was still the same pleasant surface it always was, but there was a question underneath it, the first genuine question she had directed at me all evening. "It will be," I said. She studied me for a moment. "You know, Marcus never really talks about what you do. I always assumed—" She stopped. "I know what you assumed," I said, not unkindly, just clearly. Diana appeared at my other side. She was holding her clipboard and wearing the expression she reserved for situations that required absolute professionalism and absolutely no visible emotion. "Ms. Hartwell," she said, which was the first time anyone at this party had used my name, and she said it with a quiet precision that landed in the air between the three of us like a key turning in a lock. Courtney's head turned. "I'm sorry." "Ms. Hartwell," Diana repeated, and this time she included the faintest gesture, barely perceptible, toward me. Courtney looked at me. Something shifted in her face. The pleasant surface cracked, just slightly, just at the edges. "That's your name," she said. "It has been for 31 years, I said. She shook her head slowly, still processing. "The Hartwell Group. Yes. The Hartwell Group is the holding company under which I owned at commercial properties, including the Harlow Grand. It is not a secret company. It is publicly registered. Our name is on the building's business license, which is displayed in a frame in the main lobby, the way it is required to be by the city. Nobody at this party had looked at it because nobody at this party had thought to look. Because nobody at this party had considered even for a moment that the quiet woman by the window was anything other than what they had already decided she was." Courtney's face had gone through several expressions in a short amount of time. I watched her arrive at the one that was closest to the truth of what she was feeling, which was not embarrassment exactly, but something adjacent to it. The specific discomfort of realizing that the arithmetic you did was wrong. Not a little wrong, but completely, foundationally wrong, and that everything you built on top of that arithmetic has just shifted. "I didn't know," she said. "I know you didn't," I said. "I'd like to speak to your mother now." I didn't wait for her response. I walked across the room toward Patricia, who was standing near the champagne display with her companion, still talking, still wearing her crown of pearls. She saw me coming and arranged her expression into the particular blend of politeness and dismissal she had been deploying all evening. "Can I help you?" she said. "You've made several comments this evening," I said, keeping my voice low and level, "about guests being out of their depth, about certain people not belonging at the table. At least 2 of those comments were directed at me within earshot, and one of them was directed at a member of my waitstaff earlier this evening, which I have on record." Patricia blinked. "I beg your pardon. I was simply making conversation." "You were making conversation," I agreed, "in a venue that I own, about people who work for me." I let that settle for exactly 2 seconds. "I want to be clear about something before this evening continues. The contract for this event includes a guest conduct policy. Harassment and discriminatory commentary directed at staff or ownership is grounds for termination of the event. I am the ownership." I paused. "I haven't made a decision yet. That depends on what happens in the next few minutes." Patricia opened her mouth, closed it. The companion with the chignon had gone very still. "Who are you?" Patricia said finally. "I'm Marcus's sister, I said. "I'm also the reason this building is standing." I turned and found my brother. He was still near the bar, but the easy laughter had left his posture. He had been watching from a distance, and the distance had not been enough to keep the conversation from reaching him. He set his glass down and crossed the room toward me, and I watched him do the recalculation in real time, the slight adjustments in his expression as pieces rearranged themselves into a picture he had not been prepared for. "What's going on?" he said. He was using his calm voice. He was very good at his calm voice. He had used it on me our entire lives. "I own the Harlow Grand," I said. "I bought it 3 years ago. I rebuilt it. Courtney booked it through a member of my staff without knowing." He stared at me. You never said?" "No," I agreed. "I didn't." "Why?" I looked at him for a long moment. My brother, 42 months older than me, the one my parents had pointed to when they talked about ambition, about charisma, about the one who was going somewhere. The one for whom I had handed over $9,000 at a kitchen table without being asked twice, without being thanked once. "Because the last time you knew I had money," I said quietly, "it became your money." He flinched. It was small, but it was real. "I'm not doing this to embarrass you," I said. "I want you to understand that. I came tonight because you're my brother and I love you, and I have been showing up for you my entire life in ways you don't know about and probably wouldn't recognize. I'm not here to blow up your engagement party, but I am done being invisible. And I am done standing in my own building while your future mother-in-law tells people I don't belong at the table." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Something moved through his face, something more complicated than embarrassment and less simple than anger. It was the expression of a person who has just been handed a ledger they didn't know existed and is only now beginning to understand how long it has been open. "The money for the studio?" he said slowly. "When Dad called me to say the bank had been paid off, he said he had handled it." "He had," I said, "with my money." Marcus looked at the floor, then at the room, then at Courtney, who had come to stand a few feet behind him and was watching the conversation with an expression I had never seen on her face before, quiet and attentive, and stripped entirely of the pleasant surface. "She had no idea," Marcus said, not excusing Patricia, but explaining Courtney. "About you, about any of this." "I know," I said. "Neither did you." "What happens now?" he said. I thought about it. The honest answer was that I didn't know yet, and I was done pretending certainty I didn't have. "Tonight, nothing. The event continues. I'm not going to do that to you." I looked at him steadily. "But when you get back from your honeymoon, Marcus, I need you and me to sit down, without your future in-laws, without Dad, just us. And I need you to listen, the way you never quite did when we were growing up, because you were always the one who was going somewhere, and I was always just the one who was already there." He nodded, slowly. It wasn't an apology, not yet, but it was the first nod he had given me in my adult life that felt like it meant something. I turned back to Diana. "The event continues as planned, but I'd like the catering supervisor to quietly note the conduct incident in the file. Standard documentation." "Of course," Diana said. "And tell the kitchen the crab hors d'oeuvres are excellent. Please pass that along." The corner of Diana's mouth moved, almost imperceptibly, upward. "I will." I went back to the window. I picked up my glass of sparkling water. The party continued around me. The music, the laughter, the champagne, the crowd of people who mostly didn't know what had just happened and who were already beginning to forget the slight interruption near the bar. Patricia had found a chair near the far wall and was sitting in it with a posture that was still upright but no longer expansive. The companion with the chignon had drifted away. Courtney approached me one more time, near the end of the evening, when the crowd had thinned and the catering team was quietly beginning to break down the outer tables. She came and stood beside me at the window and didn't say anything for a moment, looking out at the same view I had been looking at, the lit courtyard, the fountain I had commissioned, the garden walls I had approved from a landscaping proposal on a Tuesday afternoon while eating lunch at my desk. "I owe you an apology," she said. "Your mother owes me an apology," I said. "You owe me a conversation." She looked at me sideways. "That's a distinction." "Most important things are," I said. She was quiet again. Then, "Why did you come tonight? If you knew it was your venue, if you knew we didn't know, you could have just not come, or you could have told Marcus months ago." It was a fair question. I had asked it to myself. "Because I needed to see if anything had changed," I said. "In 20 years of family events, I have never once walked into a room where my brother seemed genuinely glad to see me from across the room. Not a little glad, actually glad. The way you are when someone shows up because you wanted them there, not because the invitation list had their name on it. I paused. I wanted to see if this one would be different. She absorbed that. I watched her absorb it, the way she looked at her own hands for a moment, then at Marcus across the room, who was talking again, though less easily than before, who kept glancing in our direction with something in his expression that was new. Was it? She asked. Different? I thought about the half wave from across the room when I walked in. I thought about the calm voice he had used. I thought about the flinch and about the slow nod. It's starting to be, I said. I set my glass down on the tray of a passing server. I retrieved my coat from the check-in near the entrance, my own check-in desk, staffed by my own hire, in my own lobby, with my business license framed on the wall. I nodded to Marcus on the way out. He nodded back with both eyes on me this time, and that was enough for tonight. Outside of Hiaz in the parking lot, I sat in my car for a few minutes without starting it. The building was lit behind me, the event going on inside it, the chandelier throwing its slight off-center glow through the upper windows. I had a note on my calendar to have a technician look at that anchor bolt next week. I had a quarterly review with the Harlow's operations manager in 10 days. I had 3 other properties in various stages of acquisition, renovation, and stabilization. I had a full and complicated life that nobody at that party had known about or asked about or made the slightest room for, because they had looked at the navy blazer and the quiet manner and the unwillingness to perform, and they had seen exactly what they expected to see. That was the part that I used to carry as shame. The invisibility, the way I had learned to disappear in rooms because disappearing was safer than being seen only as what I could provide. I had decided tonight to stop carrying it that way. The invisibility had never been the problem. The invisibility had been the strategy. I had built everything I had in the quiet that they had provided me, in the shadows they had assigned me, and I had built it so thoroughly and so carefully that when the light finally came on, it lit up every wall. My phone rang. Marcus. I let it go to voicemail. Not out of anger. I would call him back tomorrow or the next day when I had decided what I wanted from the conversation and what I was no longer willing to accept from it. I started the car. I had a building to manage, a business to run, and a life that was entirely my own. I had built it dollar by dollar, decision by decision, in the years when everyone who should have been watching was busy looking somewhere else. They could look now. I put the car in reverse and pulled out of my own parking lot, past the landscaping I had approved, past the fountain I had commissioned, past the lit entrance of the Harlow Grand, which had been crumbling and broken and written off by everyone who saw it before I decided to see what it could become. I had always had a talent for seeing the value in things that everyone else had given up on. I just never thought I would have to apply it to myself,